think our guest is here, so we are going to introduce him.
We're gonna give him well, we've already given him 10 minutes to
I think he's ready. I'm going to bring him in.
he's ready.
Here he is. Here he
Evening,
is.
guys. How are you?
We
Hi,
are
Ben.
absolutely fine and what's the word? Intrigued, fascinated. And first of all, welcome, Ben. Me and Ben, of course, have spoken many times. Welcome to my other half on this show of Chat G&G. This is Gags. Gags. I decided to ask Ben to come onto the show today. Normally, it's me and Gags just waffling on for the best part of an hour about nothing in particular, but we have something very particular to talk about, haven't we, Gags?
What could it be?
Well, welcome to the show, Ben. You've probably not met me before, but I'm the founder of Anfield Index, and yeah, welcome to the show. Obviously, first and foremost,
Thank you.
This is now Chat G&G. Yeah, for today. So I do actually, Grizz, if you don't mind me just diving straight in here, I do have some questions prepped for you, mate.
Ben is a very, very busy person. He only likes to dive in and dive out, so we haven't got long with him, so feel free.
So I think we've got what, 15, 20 minutes with you, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. We can go a bit longer as well, but 9 o'clock, I'm back on Talk Sport.
Wow. Okay. So I have 5 or 6 questions. I know we don't want to
You done homework? You done research?
Yeah, well,
this is not like Chat G&G.
But it's not like Chat G&G, is it? We just go on the fly. But since Ben was coming on, I thought we'd get some questions out that maybe the guys that are watching, listening, girls that are listening, will want to hear answers to. And yeah, we can keep it as brief as you want. You can go into as much detail as you want. As long as we get through them, it'd be great. But
brilliant.
The first question that everyone, or I think folks, and we have a big community at Anfield in Discord and WhatsApp and things like that, and so we got some questions. So the first question that came in with the story that and let's do a bit of background first. The story was that that you broke earlier, the big bomber that literally turned everything upside down today, literally in all the communities that I'm in for Liverpool, that Newcastle rejected the bid, but not only that, Liverpool kind of said we're not going to make a second bid immediately. So the first question was this briefed to you from the Liverpool side or the Newcastle side?
Well, I think as a journalist, you go to all sides. So it's not a case of one side or the other. You get information from sources, you put scrutiny on that information, and you conclude how you want to report it. And how I concluded I wanted to report it after speaking to all sides is that at the moment, Liverpool are not inclined to place a second bid. But you'll note I said, as it stands. And the point of as it stands is that there's two different things here. One is not inclined to place a bid, and the other is pulling out. And at the moment, they've not pulled out of the race for Alexander Isak, but they're not inclined to bid. So how do those two things marry and make sense? Well, what it means is Newcastle United would have to go to Liverpool and say, we want to engage. Are they going to do that if Isak continues to force a move? Maybe. Are they going to do that if they bring in an attacker or two? Maybe. And that will be later in the next days, the next weeks between now and September the 3rd. Are they going to do that before the game in August against Liverpool in the Premier League? I think you can never say never. But right now, the accurate state of play, I'm told, is after the bid, which was £110 million, no add-ons. Liverpool have indicated that they're not just going to come back with another bid, that they're not preparing a higher offer because they think the nature of the rebuffal today was categorical enough that unless they're given that encouragement, that outreach from Newcastle, they're wasting their time as of now. Does that mean it's over? No. Does that mean we're going to get another bid this evening? Also no. And that's pretty much what I reported. And naturally, it gets quite a lot of negative feedback. As ever, bad news is bad reporting, good news is good reporting, and so on. But I think it's quite widely reflected now with other great journalists that I would encourage you to read. And context with this Isak saga is going to prove very important.
So do you think this is just, as a follow-up, a PR exercise by Newcastle, or is it high-stakes football business? This is the way it is? Because obviously a lot of folks that are following this story are kind of perceiving it as if it's a hold Now, if I just go back a little bit, Newcastle's window has been horrendous. From the optics, but everybody hates that word optics, but from an optical perspective, Liverpool's window has been complete opposite, staggeringly amazing. And so what needs to happen for this to happen is Newcastle need to sign a player or two for anything to happen to make it possible. Is this kind of a PR exercise where we're just pausing, giving space, giving time to allow that time to get those players in, because it seems like it's a real difficult task at the moment for them?
Yeah, I don't think this is only about replacements, although naturally, if they got a Shesko, a Watkins, Jackson, a Wissa, probably two, people would rightly, in my opinion, think that they are in some ways pre-spending a bit of the Isak money. So clearly Liverpool are in a stronger position if Newcastle acts freely in the market. But I think before we get into that, this is really more about Isak, because Liverpool have shown their hand, and they've done that just before he's due to report back to training. And they've done that with a lot of leeway. People are saying they're puzzled by 110 when they said that they would bid 120 a few weeks ago. But remember, when you arrive with confidence, and that was genuinely Liverpool's position this morning, you got to leave leeway. You know the first bid's never going to be accepted. Yeah. There's no release clause. So you come in at 110, because 110 is a lot of money on the fixed fee. It's much better than 100 plus 20, where you gamble on 20, you take 110.
I was just going to say, Ben, I want you to clarify that, because some people may not have heard that or read that, or may have misunderstood that. So according to your information, the bid was, and I'll let you explain that part of the story.
Yeah, 110, no add-ons. And I think they bid that with confidence, because they thought, okay, Newcastle are probably not going to say 150 or even counter at all, but they might engage there, because you leave it open to put some add-ons on that and we can have a conversation, or you leave it open to make your fixed fee a British transfer record and put some add-ons on and we can have a conversation. And this is why you come in at that number. And rarely do you offer that magnitude of money and fixed if you don't think that the answer's at least going to be, let's have a meeting or a conversation. So Liverpool went in more optimistic than people realize. And this is why the emphatic and quick nature of the rebuffal not only caught them by surprise to some extent, but made them think, okay, maybe we are, as of now, wasting our time in making any imminent progress.
I'm really confused though, Ben, because, sorry to cut you off, I'm really confused because the reporting around this for the last month, maybe two, has been that nothing short of 130 to 150 will be enough.
That's just the reporting. Yeah. That's just the number. Nobody's ever quoted Newcastle a number. So it's true that Newcastle insiders have said for some time that 150 is a number that they might have to consider, but that's never been relayed back to Liverpool. And you can argue Isak is driving his own price down by being at Real Sociedad and not being part of pre-season. British transfer record's a British transfer record. So if you're sensible and you understand how these transfers work of this magnitude, same with Florian Wirtz, at some point, even if it's all very positive, you're going to have to go up and up and up, whether verbally or formally. It's the case with every transfer. If there's no release clause, 2-3 bids, whether verbal, informal, even if it's positive. So if you're starting at 110, it might mean that they're prepared to go to 130, but not necessarily with the first bid, because you have to have a point of conversation. And if your first bid leads to anything positive, you know you're in a strong position. So why start high? If they came in, as some people suggested, at 120 plus add-ons, there's almost no chance you're getting that deal done for under 150. If you come in at 110 and there is any positive dialogue, then you may have a chance of getting it at 120, at 130, which is ultimately the number that they indicated they were prepared to pay. But finishing what I was saying before, more important than the number and more important than the rebuffal, and maybe even more important than who Newcastle do or don't sign, is actually Isak now. Because Liverpool have shown their hand, Newcastle have shown their hand. So each club knows exactly where the other club is as of today. Newcastle will claim they're puzzled by the bid, but I actually think it's quite normal to say, here's a starting point, let's see how they react. And similarly, Liverpool have made their position clear that as of now, they're not simply preparing a new offer. But the only thing we don't know, and Newcastle don't know crucially, is Alexander Isak. Does he return? And then Newcastle have encouragement that maybe out of nowhere, like with Gibbs White this window, can they get him to sign a new deal on the premise he can go in a year's time? And does that suit Liverpool because they wait a year and get him at better value? Or does Isak surprise Newcastle even further as he's done all summer and double down? What if the player says, I'm not coming back, I'm not training, I don't want to be part of the Premier League squad, I want to sit out every single game, I'm never going to play for you again, and persists with that stance all the way through August, all the way up to and past the Newcastle-Liverpool game in August. And then Eddie Howe, every press conference, every back page, every headline is all about Alexander Isak. Is there actually a way by doubling down, the door opens to Liverpool? And this is where Liverpool are waiting, because they're saying, let the player do the work. Let Newcastle do the work in the recruitment market. And then maybe they think if they back off, it's going to be Newcastle that come calling saying, actually, we want to do this deal. We need to do this deal now. So I come back to what I've said before. 3 months ago, my understanding was there were 3 options and only 3 options. Extend at Newcastle, stay at Newcastle with Champions League football because he's well contracted and well paid, or, of course, go to Liverpool. Now I think there's only 2 options. I'm not of the belief anymore that Isak just staying, even if Newcastle forced him to, is tenable. And I don't think that's just tenable in terms of the player wouldn't like it. I think Newcastle United, from sources I've spoken to in the last 24 hours, think it is an untenable scenario where Isak just stays, even if contractually that is an option to the club. So I think it's only going to end in 2 ways now. Way 1, out of nowhere, he signs a new deal with the premise he can leave. Way 2, he still ends up at Liverpool. But for Liverpool to bid again, as I broke, Newcastle United will have to pick up the phone and say this deal is on.
Before you're on mute, Grizz, but I was going to ask you the same thing. So basically, you've answered it. I think was that everything is on Isak's shoulders now. The game is being played where.
Well, this is what Gags. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but you've asked way too many questions, and I feel left out. So I've just thought of an angle that I'm gonna get Ben's opinion on, because Ben, when Edwards and Hughes came back, or when Edwards came back to the club,
we lost him.
He asked a question,
you know what?
And then he got halfway through his question, and he got kicked out of his own show.
Can I ask you before he comes back? What's your gut feel? No, without the sources, what's your gut feel on what happens?
I don't give these gut feels or these percentages because we're journalists. We're not in the game of just giving you any false hope or any numbers so people can just cling and go, Ben Jacobs said there's an X% chance of it happening. I'll give you the reporting. And this is probably one of the most complicated transfer sagas that every journalist will have to report on, because almost everyone you go to, you do get a bit of counter opinion or info. So you kind of have to give all the caveats, because I've spoken to at least 20 people today, and I've done that for about 4 hours before I broke my story. And even after I'd spoken to people that are in the know, in the room, involved, I still thought, wait a minute, I'm not getting everyone on the same page here. And this is why we have to be very cautious and careful. I know people don't like to hear, if you're a Liverpool fan, that they're not bidding, but that's not quite what I said. I said they've got no plans now to bid. Right. So my gut reaction is we haven't seen the end of this saga. That's how I feel we're at the moment. I think there will be another twist. And I think there has to be another twist, because the first twist is going to be Liverpool do still try because they get encouragement from Newcastle, as I've reported. The second twist is going to be that he ends up out of nowhere signing a new deal and leaving in 12 months' time. So I think it's one of those 2 options, but I can't tell you or predict which one yet, because it's all on the shoulders of Alexander Isak still to determine, I think, what the next step is. How hard does he really want this Liverpool move? And is he prepared to fall out with his own football club and force his way out and overshadow their Premier League season? Or is he prepared to do 12 more months, knowing that then they'll actually let him leave very freely? And I think that is what it is going to come down to.
No, appreciate it. I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's just that a lot of people think that I pulled the plug on Grizz.
No, you absolutely did.
I did not pull the plug on Grizz.
you can't keep a good man down. I am back with a vengeance. So I shall be taking over for the next 3 minutes. Where I was going to, Ben, was to ask about sort of how we know Edwards operated in his first stint at Liverpool in terms of how we dealt with players and transfer, especially high-profile transfers, where you have spoken about many times on my channel about sort of the tactics we use. For example, we always get the player buy-in. And this is what's very apparent we've done in this situation. It's very apparent that we have got the total buy-in of the player. And we hold all the cards from the player's side. Now, people talking about power plays and 4D chess. How does today's events, in your opinion, help Liverpool in this case, in this scenario? Because it seems like, and we don't know, but it seems like there's been a low ball offer, which is absolutely natural, as you said. You go in at a price that you think, okay, and then you work your way up. But I think we've been, and according to your reporting and many others of your colleagues as well, we were taken aback by the response. And therefore, it seems like a standoff of almost egos and prides at stake and a power play here.
Yeah, more than that. I mean, first of all, can we really call 110 million fixed a low ball offer? I don't think so, because it seems obvious to me that even if Newcastle were willing sellers, they would take that 110 and say, stick 10 million in add-ons on it. And I don't think Liverpool would have any issue with that. So 110 initial versus 120 that nobody would say was a low ball and was 110 plus 10. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So don't get too sucked in by the 110, because you're not talking about 80 plus 30. You're talking about 110 million pounds fixed, guaranteed, that Newcastle can spend immediately, probably with quite preferable payment terms as well. And I'd be staggered if Newcastle had responded and gone, great, that's a really good starting point. Can we discuss something around 120, 125? I think it would get done very quickly if there was that willingness. So this doesn't feel lowball to me, even though Newcastle sources are briefing it as unsettling the player and not being serious. It's the opposite as far as I'm aware. Alexander Isak was unsettled long before Liverpool made an approach, long before Liverpool made a bid. And let's not forget that Newcastle United sources were saying he's gone AWOL. Nobody was confirming that it was part of the plan for him to go to Real Sociedad, whether for recovery or whether for solo training. And now suddenly this bid today has allegedly, from some Newcastle sources, and we have to respect that, which is why I'm mentioning it. I don't want to be unfair to the Newcastle side, but Newcastle sources are insisting this is a sign of Newcastle unsettling the player, of Newcastle going about it the wrong way, of Liverpool going about it the wrong way. They're all sort of saying it's about process. It's about everybody kind of doing things that aren't right for the player on both sides, really, to be honest with you, but particularly today, Liverpool. And the reality is that he was AWOL and he was absent before this bid came in and before even the approach came in. So I don't think this bid has had any bearing on the player, other than the fact he'll probably be quite encouraged to see Liverpool get moving. But what I would say is that the context of how Liverpool work in big transfers, like Florian Wirtz, for example, where it was Fernando Caro at Leverkusen with Richard Hughes, and how they worked under Michael Edwards when he was running the show, I don't think it's relevant. Because the thing that people don't understand with this saga, take the British transfer record and the caliber of the player and the politics, take all that away and just think about one clear thing. Newcastle United do not have a sporting director. Eddie Howe has more say than ever. Eddie Howe and Richard Hughes regularly in contact because they're friends and they're close. And yet this deal is going to be signed off by Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who is the big boss, also has to consider the PIF perspective. And in addition to that is the de facto sporting director, because Paul Mitchell has gone. And then if you add to the fact that the old sporting director, Paul Mitchell, didn't have a good relationship with Alexander Isak and has in many ways manufactured the situation we're in, because had they just offered Isak a new deal a year ago, he probably would be happy and Liverpool would probably have to come again in 2026. Then you have the fact that Yasser Al-Rumayyan is a wild card negotiator. He won't sign off anything unless it's on his terms, his negotiation, his deal. It's the Saudi way. You may know I'm Saudi correspondent for Talk Sport. You don't get these deals done when dealing with Saudi deal makers unless they think that they've got the better end of the bargain. So it becomes difficult. And my understanding is that this will not be a typical Richard Hughes deal because it's Michael Edwards that's got the relationship generally with the Saudi side. And if this is to get done, I think it will almost be an informal conversation. So when I say about Newcastle encouragement, where may that come from? It will likely come from Yasser Al-Rumayyan privately and informally calling up specifically Michael Edwards and them almost saying, okay, how can we get on the same page? And then it will turn into another formal negotiation. And I think if Edwards and Al-Rumayyan are not involved and do not have that relationship, I'm not sure this just gets done through a mixture of Richard Hughes, Eddie Howe, Steve Nixon, who's kind of running the show on the Newcastle side. So the Saudi and the Rumayyan wild card angle to this. And as you may know, and some that have been following my work, sometimes Saudi just walk away out of principle. Sometimes they're stubborn. Sometimes they turn away good money. I think to Victor Osimhen, when PIF were negotiating and they thought he was going to Al Ahly, they agreed a deal. Player was waiting for a medical. And then suddenly out of nowhere, De Laurentiis called up the Saudis and basically said, you know what? If Ivan Toney's someone that you're working on concurrently for 40 million, I want another 15 million euros. And of course, the Saudis wanted Osimhen. Osimhen wanted to join. Money was not an object. And they went, no way. We're not doing that deal because if you move the goalposts, if you change the terms. So this is why it's quite hard to judge, because even if it makes financial sense, even if there's lots of people within Newcastle and the player camp that say, okay, he's going to get his move. Yasser Al-Rumayyan might wake up today and go, no chance. He might wake up tomorrow morning and go, I'm going to sanction it. And this is why we have to be very cautious with how we report the story.
Can we pivot quickly? We come back to Newcastle and Isak, but you've been multitasking whilst on the show. You've tweeted something about Nunez, and we're talking about Saudi, so it stays on topic. Can you tell us a little bit about the Nunez story that's just breaking out there right now?
Yeah, it's breaking now, but it was something I ran exclusively a few weeks ago, and it's still my understanding that Darwin Nunez is an option for Al Hilal. I know we heard some suggestions of Al Ahly. That's not my understanding. Al Ahly, remember, have got Ivan Toney. They're looking for midfielders at the moment. Darwin Nunez was also subject of a Al Nassr bid in January for 70 million euros. It was turned down. It's important because it informs Liverpool's valuation. So Liverpool are looking for 70 million for Darwin Nunez. And if it's Saudi and euros, yeah. And if it's Saudi in particular, then they're not going to settle for anything less than 70 million euros. But even though they rejected it in January, I'm not of the belief they rejected it on financial terms. I think a bit like they tried with Luis Diaz, they ran the kind of numbers and they said, does the data point towards keeping Nunez and winning this Premier League or getting rid of him mid-season, in the same way that the data said keep Luis Diaz? But ultimately, the player drives the exit and you can't really put that into a data algorithm. But essentially, the 70 million was good enough in January. It was just what trumped the 70 million was keep the player until the end of the season. Now there's less time on the contract. And if that valuation is met around the 70 million euros mark, the offer will be accepted. And I think that it's as simple as that. So then it's just about, does Darwin Nunez want Saudi Arabia? Because earlier in the window, he was very keen on that move to Napoli, but they got nowhere near Liverpool's valuation. I think their last verbal offer was about 50 million euros. And again, Liverpool pointed towards that 70 million euros. So I expect this one to move. I'll keep you posted later in the evening or tomorrow as to whether there has been a formal offer. Some Saudi sources say there has been significant club-to-club engagement in the last 24 to 48 hours. I've put that to Liverpool sources, and I'm told the talks and discussions are a bit more tentative. There is a feeling within Saudi that Simone Inzaghi, who's got a big say in all of this, especially because the Hilal president, Fahad bin Nafel's just stood down. So Inzaghi's sort of interim running the show here, and Fahad bin Nafel will be outgoing and they'll have a new election and all of this. Some even say, by the way, Paul Mitchell is going to be coming into Al Hilal as sporting director. And I can confirm another exclusive I broke. He's definitely a candidate. I'm just not sure they've offered him the job yet. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts in all of this. But in essence, Inzaghi is the one pretty much making the final call. And last week I was told there were 2 strikers that he'd narrowed it down to, of which one was in Spain. I don't have the name, unfortunately. And another was Darwin Nunez. So it is very possible this develops. But I'm near certain, if it does develop, that Al Hilal are going to be the club, not Al Nassr again, and not Al Ahly.
But this is another question that Liverpool fans will want to know and ask. I haven't seen any ask yet, but I'm sort of thinking for them, which can be dangerous. Can this in any way, shape, or form, Ben, be linked? And I'm sure there is some form of link with obviously the story about Isak, because if that deal doesn't happen, and simultaneously we do get rid of Nunez, Liverpool will be left with no striker. We obviously know the tragic circumstances of Diogo. Nunez was anticipated and still expected to be leaving. Does that suddenly put more pressure on Liverpool as well? Because at the moment, it seems like Liverpool are sitting comfortable and just awaiting Newcastle to handle their business before we go in for the swoop. Does this muddy waters, or is this just part of a play that we have to see play out, basically?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that was there to be a not expected, but not impossible, I guess, scenario where Darwin Nunez was just told by Liverpool, we've got Ekitike, we're not going to get Isak, we want you to stay. You would think that Nunez would be relatively happy about that scenario as well. I get the impression that Liverpool are looking to sell Darwin Nunez, but Darwin Nunez is ultimately very content if he was to end up just staying at Liverpool. And Hugo Ekitike can obviously play in different areas, still potentially allowing Nunez to get some time leading the line. But obviously, if Darwin Nunez goes, then there is a fair chance that another striker comes in, which means if they've got even more money and they've got another space in the squad, of course, it will lead people to put 2 and 2 together and say, how can they not be back for Alexander Isak? But I think we're just going to have to wait and see, because at the moment they're 2 separate cases. And the first thing I'll try and confirm is just whether or not a scenario actually arises where Hilal bid, because there's a lot of whispers, there's a lot of talk, there's definitely an approach, but are they going to meet that valuation? And does Darwin Nunez in a World Cup year want Saudi Arabia? These are the answers, unfortunately, that we don't have at the moment. Regarding Jota, I've said before, and I have no care whatsoever if it makes my reporting out of context. I'm not personally going into that. I've never asked a single person at Liverpool Football Club about how they're going to react in the market because of the sad passing of Diogo Jota. Now, I appreciate there will be people at Liverpool that have to think about this and may have to think about this during the window, but I've just never felt it appropriate as a journalist to go to anybody in sourcing information about how Diogo's tragic passing is going to affect them, whether that adds more urgency, whether it changes the position they're looking at. So as we said on the last show, I looked at it as Luis Diaz, not for sale, but suddenly for sale because he was driving the move. And then you start to think, do they need a left winger? But obviously Ekitike can also float out wide. Then I look at it as, is it Ekitike or Isak, or Ekitike and Isak? And we know that they've tried for both. And then you think Darwin Nunez goes, and they definitely need another attacker of sorts. Absolutely. Can they find left-sided and central, or are they going to go for a more defined profile? And is it going to be informed by Diogo Jota? Only Liverpool hierarchy and senior recruitment people will know. I have never felt comfortable so soon after asking the question or factoring it into my reporting. I prefer to not have the context and be respectful to Liverpool Football Club and grieve with the family and the fan base and put some distance that for me may extend beyond even this window, and just think about immortalizing the memory of Diogo Jota, retiring the shirt and not trying to ask questions about the void that he may leave. We may find a signing, even more than one signing, comes out of nowhere, and it's obvious that they've gone in a direction because they have to think in football terms. But as a journalist, I've never had that context. I've never tried to get that story. I've never looked at that angle yet. And I think more time for me personally would have to pass. So I can't answer how Diogo Jota is going to influence this recruitment, the volume they buy or the position they go for. And that is a very intentional thing. So unfortunately, I can't really give you a very good answer to that question.
You've given an excellent answer to that question, and this is why you are respected, especially amongst the Liverpool fan base. You know, and we, you know, we echo those words, so we respect that you haven't sort of gone down that avenue